We've been working very hard on getting our voices heard, but also changing the narrative that we're just victims of climate crisis.
Tonight, delegates from BC represent at an international climate conference in Egypt.
It does give some belief that what you do is valid.
Plus, some familiar faces in the latest Order of Canada picks.
Anyone who participates is invited to post their photos using the hashtag #RockYourMocks.
And a virtual event is uniting people across Turtle Island. Good evening, Tansei, and welcome to APTN National News. I'm Daryl Stranger. In Nunavut, a long-awaited decision about the Baffinland iron ore mine was delivered on Wednesday. The mine did not receive permission to double their production as they requested. Now the responses are beginning to come in. Our Kent Driscoll joins us from Iqaluit. Kent, how is the mining company taking their loss?
Thanks. Now, Baffinland has put out a statement regarding the federal decision to back the Nunavut Impact Review Board and not allow the mine expansion. And it hits all the notes that you may expect. In the note, Baffinland CEO Brian Penny wrote, "We are disappointed by the minister's decision. Given the 4 years of work and the material progress made since May, we are disappointed the minister did not encourage all parties to promptly settle any outstanding issues and agree on a practical path forward for the project." Now, there's a little history behind that statement. The way Nunavut's regulatory system works, Nunavut Impact Review Board makes a recommendation to the federal minister, in this case, Northern Affairs Minister Dan Vandel. Now, back in 2017, the feds decided to send a decision back to the review board to ask them and the mine to work out a deal. And they did. It seems that that's what Baffinland was hoping for but didn't receive. Now, for the 350 Inuit who work at the mine, the Baffinland CEO wrote, quote, "The minister's decision has immediate and significant implications for the current Mary River operations and our workforce of 2,500 people." As for Minister Vandel, following the formal decision letter to the Nunavut Impact Review Board, Vandel put out another statement, and it seems to point to a possible future for the mine. He wrote, "As noted, this process is best left to a new project assessment in which all potentially affected parties can participate. Such an assessment can avail itself of the significant work already done through the Phase 2 project certificate reconsideration." The previous process, that took 4 years to complete, but that did include a global pandemic. Now, Baffinland has been making promises to Nunavut that would have been fulfilled if this increase had have gone through. According to the mine, Nunavut will be missing out on $679 million in taxes to the government of Nunavut, $1.67 billion in taxes and royalties to the government of Canada, $1.4 billion in royalties to NTI, over $1 billion in royalties to QIA, and about $15 million that was supposed to build 5 daycares in the 5 closest communities. Back to you in Winnipeg.
Thanks for that, Kent. Leaders from Treaties 6, 7, and 8 in Alberta held a press conference in Edmonton today denouncing new Alberta Premier Danielle Smith's proposed Alberta Sovereignty Act. The act would allow the province of Alberta to disregard any federal legislation. This could give Alberta the ability to reject any federal decisions on energy and resource projects, and could also stop Indigenous communities from having any control on resource development. APTN News will have the full story on Monday's APTN National News. We want to hear what you think about some of the stories you've seen so far tonight. Here's how to continue the conversation. Send your emails to news@aptn.ca or leave a comment on aptnnews.ca. You can also find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok. Follow APTN News to join the conversation and see our latest stories. The 2022 United Nations Conference on Climate Change is currently underway in Egypt. Cookbee Judy Wilson with the Union of BC Indian Chiefs spoke with our Dennis Ward about the conference.
Cookbee, thanks so much for joining us from Egypt. Indigenous delegations have traveled to these climate summits before. What makes this conference different, and how are Indigenous voices being heard?
Well, at COP27, it's the largest Indigenous delegation for quite some time. So in the Indigenous Peoples Caucus that we had the first 2 days of the 2 weeks, we worked together, networked, and came up with an Indigenous Peoples statement in regards to what we'd like to see in regards to the outcome. And a big part of our work has been to retain what was achieved in the Glasgow COP26. So a lot of the references to Indigenous people's rights, and also including us in the mechanisms and the processes, like in 6.4 for loss and damage or adaptation. All of those are really important. And I was representing Kluane, Regional Chief Kluane Adamak. She is the chair for our Assembly of First Nations Climate Action and Environment Advisory Council. So we've been working for many years on these issues, and she's been at the forefront of a lot of these international and national climate change, climate crisis issues. So we had a delegation that came here. Included Lorraine Nitro from the Old Crow, Yukon, and the Arctic Canada, and also our youth representative, Taylor Bain Suzuzo. I'm not saying her name right. It's a kind of hard name to say. But, you know, so then there's lots of youth that came from all around the world to this COP27, and we've been working very hard on getting our voices heard, but also changing the narrative that we're just victims of climate crisis, that we're actually the climate leaders today, because many of our Indigenous nations, as you know, had been doing climate work for even before the word was coined. So they've been working as land defenders and water protectors for many years.
Cookbee, no doubt you know there have been some high-profile boycotts of this year's event over Egypt's human rights record. What made you decide to make the trip?
Well, it was a hard decision because it's so far away from home, for one thing, and you know we've got a lot of crises in our own community, day to day, and in our nation. It's key and critical. We do have to have some outcomes here at COP27, and we need to work with our Indigenous brothers and sisters around the world on the solutions, because our Indigenous knowledge is so important in the climate crisis. And in BC, Minister Galbo, he categorized it as the epicenter, or the main area. We've been having everything you could think of in climate crisis. So, you know, it's driven the point home. We all need to do something about the climate crisis, and there needs to be more than just, you know, mechanisms, more than just these solutions they call nature-based, for example. You know, it removes us from, you know, Indigenous knowledge and Indigenous people's rights when they call nature-based solutions. So we're over here explaining and debunking a lot of those, you know, false solutions, but explaining how, as Indigenous people, we need to be key front and center. Self-determination, our Indigenous people's rights, and free, prior, informed consent is really important, and the recognition of our rights in these issues. So that's what we've been doing here, and we've had a great AFN delegation, but we've had been networking with the you know, the different nations around the world, including our brothers and sisters and relatives from south of the border, the Medicine Line as well. So it's been really a lot of meetings, a lot of sessions, and a lot of plenaries. Canada had its first pavilion, so we had Indigenous leaders, climate leaders session there today. The youth had their climate session as well, and we've been advocating for a lot of the youth to be more front and center in these issues as well. And I think explaining a lot of the root causes are the imbalance in the world, the imbalances of, extractivism versus, leaving the tar sand and the fossil fuels in the ground, for example, and looking at reconnection, if you will, to the way we should be living, connecting with Mother Earth and the water and all of our creation. So those are the kind of messages that we've been having in these different plenaries, and we are getting the ear of government in our own country, but also the ear of other nations around the world.
Cookby Wilson, we'll have to leave it there, but thanks for taking some time for us, and safe travels.
Thank you.
All right, we have to step aside for a short break. Still ahead, two well-known Indigenous people were given the Order of Canada this week. We'll tell you who next. Welcome back. Tom Jackson and Ovid Mercury are two very well-known individuals, and both were at Rideau Hall in Ottawa on Thursday, where they were both honored with the Order of Canada. APTN's Fraser Needham has more.
It was a day for bestowing the highest of honors. In all, 48 people received Order of Canada designations. Jackson is an award-winning actor, musician, and activist, and he had this to say about being selected as a companion of the Order of Canada.
It does give some belief that what you do is valid. And most of the work that I've been acknowledged for in some way has been connected to saving lives. And on the other hand, has to do with art.
Mercury spent many years battling the Crown when he was the head of the Assembly of First Nations in the 1990s. And he says accepting an award like the Order of Canada allows him the opportunity to talk about the problems that still exist.
And still use that opportunity to speak about the divide that's there and why it's important for the next generation to pick up that battle to improve the human condition for our people. And that includes continuing to advocate for our rights and freedoms, for our self-determination.
Jackson says it is inspiring to see so many Canadian Indigenous artists making their impact on the world.
There are great leaders everywhere, and people like Graham Greene is an example. Michelle Thrush is an example. Tantu Cardinal as an example, that have also given a value to what they do beyond the art.
For his part, Mercury says there are lots of different ways for young Indigenous activists to change the world. They just have to choose where they want to do it.
Is the country where you want to make the change? In other words, the province of Manitoba or any province in the country? Or do you want to make the change in your own community, with your own people, with your own nation? So you make a choice first. And then you stay in that camp as best you can. You get all the skills you can get, whatever they may be, acquire all the knowledge you need, and be fully ambitious for courage, right? And then just go to work.
Governor General Mary Simon was ill and could not attend the ceremony. In her place, former Governor General Michael Jean filled in and handed out the hardware. Fraser Needham, APTN National News, Ottawa.
Earlier this week, we told you about Emma Morrison, the new Miss World Canada. Morrison, Cree from the Chapleau Cree Nation in Northern Ontario, is the first Indigenous woman to hold the title. Morrison spoke to APTN to tell us more about herself. She grew up hunting and fishing and now makes ribbon skirts as part of her humanitarian campaign for the Miss World Canada pageant. She says she feels empowered and resilient wearing her ribbon skirts and wanted to encourage making them for other women and LGBTQ2S+ people to help them feel the same strength.
Last year, where I was going through a really emotional time, and I could say the same for a lot of First Nation communities here in Canada, was when after the 215 unmarked graves were found at Camp Loops Residential School, This inspired me to reconnect to my culture, and this is when I began my Beauty is a Purpose.
Morrison wants to use her new platform as Miss World Canada to advocate for Indigenous issues here in Canada. During the pageant, she was asked a question about what she would say to the Canadian government if presented the opportunity to discuss Indigenous issues.
And when I got on stage, I was absolutely shocked that I, the only Indigenous woman in top 8, received this question. And then I remember looking at my mom and was thinking, oh, I'm getting emotional talking about this. I remember looking at my mom and saying to myself, like, this is the time to raise my voice for Indigenous issues.
It's time for one final break, but still to come, an online moccasin event brings Indigenous peoples together.
Like last year, this year's Rock Your Mock celebration is a week long, starting on November 13th and ending on the 19th.
Welcome back. It's time now for our photo of the day. With the colder temperatures upon us, Jason Kershane wants to remind us of warmer days. This is from his summer enjoying the sunset at the end of the day at West Hawk Lake, located in southeastern Manitoba. Thanks for the photo, Jason. We want to see your photos of family, nature, the environment, decorations, great food, and gatherings. Send your photos to share@aptn.ca. All right, now let's take a look at tomorrow's weather forecast. Starting on the East Coast, 4 degrees in St. John's and 3 in Charlottetown. -1 in Cartwright and -4 in Happy Valley Goose Bay. -2 and some snow in Quebec City and -3 and snow in Val-d'Or. -1 in Toronto and -2 in North Bay. -4 and some snow in Timmins and -17 in Big Trout Lake. -21 in Churchill and -9 in Norway House. -7 and some snow in Barons River and -9 in Winnipeg. -5 in Regina and -7 in Clear North Battleford. -3 in Buffalo Narrows and -7 in Uranium City. As we move west, -8 in Fort Chippewa and -3 in Peace River. 3 degrees and clear in Edmonton and 4 degrees in Calgary. 5 degrees in Campbell River and -7 in Quesnel. 7 degrees in Prince Rupert and -12 in Fort Nelson. -13 and snowing in Dawson and -7 and snow in Rock River. Snow and -10 in Norman Wells and -10 in Trout Lake. -4 in Nuvik and -4 in Colville Lake. -31 in Baker Lake and -18 in Arviat. -13 in snow in Aglulik and -10 in Iqaluit. November is Native American Heritage Month, so that means this week is the time for Rock Your Mocks, a virtual unity event celebrating all things moccasins. Our friends at ICT put together this report on what it is and how you can participate. Here's senior correspondent Vincent Moniz.
Like last year, this year's Rock Your Mock celebration is a week long, starting on November 13th and ending on the 19th. But organizers say to wear your mocks all through the month of November. Anyone can participate by wearing moccasins to school, work, or wherever they go. The event itself was established in 2011 and is now celebrated by Indigenous people all across the world. Those who don't have moccasins or whose tribes don't traditionally wear them are encouraged to wear a turquoise-colored awareness ribbon instead. Organizers say the main day to celebrate will always be November 15th. And remember, anyone who participates is invited to post their photos using the hashtag #RockYourMocks. In Bismarck, North Dakota, Vincent Moniz, ICT News.
And here is a sampling from Facebook put together by our team. Here, you can rock your mocks until Sunday. Tamara Bahi Ramirez sent this photo from Corpus Christi, Texas. This photo comes from Fairbanks, Alaska. These moccasins are from Don Wilbur on the Menominee Indian Reserve in Wisconsin. Here in Canada, Christine Holokwa in New Westminster, BC, shared her moccasins. Brianna Ninham, also from Wisconsin, sent in her photo. And last but not least, from Oak Park, Michigan, Brenda Weinstock shared her moccasins. Newhawk leaders in Bella Coola, British Columbia are employing an interesting tactic in their resistance to mining exploration on their traditional territory. It involves totem poles. APTN Investigates reporter Christopher Reed spent a week on the ground in Newhawk territory speaking with elders and leadership over the mounting concerns. Christopher, thanks for being here. Let's just jump right into it. What's going on in Newhawk territory?
Well, Newhawk territory is in the area of Bella Coola, which is about a third of the way up the British Columbia coast, and it's a little way inland. It's surrounded by mountains. Rivers are fed by glacial streams, so it's this beautiful ecosystem that the Newhawk have been living at forever. But this mining exploration company called Juggernaut has come along and is studying 3 locations in the surrounding mountains. They say it looks promising for gold mining, which doesn't have a reputation for being all that good for the environment. So the Newhawk leadership, and this involves both the hereditary chiefs and the elected band government, by the way, they are having their carvers make totem poles to install near where the Juggernaut company is working as a message to that company. This is ours, leave it alone.
So how is it that Juggernaut has been able to operate in the Newhawk territory if they're not welcome?
Well, the Newhawk are being engaged on this issue through what's called the Coastal First Nations Reconciliation Agreement. And even though they've said no, the provincial government has permitted Juggernaut to do its work, which includes doing core samples. And last summer, Newhawk leaders actually delivered what they called an eviction notice to Juggernaut workers. A proclamation was read to Juggernaut workers in their Bella Coola Hotel parking lot. But they've continued to come back this summer, and community leadership continues to tell the province they don't want this, including in a recent letter to the province in which they invoke the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. So now they're going with the totem pole option.
So, Christopher, tell us a little more about why Newhawk people are putting totem poles up where Juggernaut will see them.
Well, these are sacred mountains. Mount Pootlis is one of the spots being looked at for mining, and it is where the first Newhawk people descended from the heavens. It's like open pit mining in the Garden of Eden. So for the Newhawk, this is about defending these areas where they believe supernatural beings are, beings Newhawk people are supposed to protect. It's about reawakening the mountains, in essence, and reawakening the stories the Newhawk have told about their home forever.
All right, we'll have to leave it there. Chris, thanks for updating us on this, and we really appreciate it. You can catch APTN Investigates Reawakening the Mountains a few minutes from now following APTN National News. All right, and that is all we have for you on this Friday edition of APTN National News. If you missed any of our stories and you want to catch up, you can visit our website, aptnnews.ca. I'm Daryl Stranger. Thank you for joining us. Miigwech, and have a great night.